Today we're talking with Dr. Julie Shamas. Julie is an emergency room physician whose family lost one home, had two others flooded, and lost 4 cars in Hurricanes Helen and Milton. What she learned about disaster preparedness is essential for all of us to understand, particularly if you have someone or yourself who has medical needs. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene, and today I am thrilled to have our friend Julie Shamas on with us. She is an ER physician and has a world of knowledge and has survived 2 hurricanes and has so much information to share with us. So you're going to want to watch this. So Julie, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kylene. Okay, so my name is Dr. Julie Shamas. I am an emergency physician. I've been a physician for more than 25 years, I think. I'd have to sit and do the math. I live in Florida, which is sort of hurricane central. And I am the mom of 2 great daughters, one of whom is an insulin diabetic. So I sort of get to play on both teams here. I get to be on the doctor side, and I also get to be on the family patient side in terms of what you really do when things happen, because we have to do those things.
And now you have been in 2 hurricanes and have survived, but not without some challenges. Talk to us about that.
So we've actually been in a lot more storms than that. I have, since I was a little girl, there have been storms that have come and gone. I remember having lost a boat on my birthday when I was 9, and my parents forgetting my birthday, which was lots of fun. I got headway out of that for about 2 decades. But you know, now being on the other end of it, I can understand how stressed they were. But in recent times, we had issues with both Helene and Milton, and of course, those are the hurricanes I think that people sort of have paid attention to in the last year or so. I have a big extended family in this area, lots of people, lots of houses. And unfortunately, we had 3 houses that were impacted, one of which was just a no-go, and my father subsequently moved. They also lost 4 cars in the process, some of which shouldn't have happened and had to do with lack of planning or being told that planning had happened and planning hadn't happened. So fun story there is that the next door neighbor of my father actually asked my father if he could put the car in his house for safekeeping and put his Maserati in my father's garage where there was 3 feet of water. And so that was not a good plan. And had I been part of it, that would not have been permitted. But, you know, people do things that aren't always well thought out. Lessons learned, definitely. Yeah. And lessons learned from Helene to Milton. And unfortunately, we had about 12 days to learn those lessons before the second storm hit. But we did learn some lessons, and we made some changes literally in the hours after the first storm that impacted our ability to adapt for the second storm. So that was a very good thing.
Why don't you share some of those lessons with us? What did you do differently?
So let me back it up and tell you a little bit about where we are. There is a neighborhood where my children used to go to school, where, I don't know, a quarter of our friends live there, that anytime there is a hurricane in Florida, that they pull footage to show the guy in the canoe going down the middle of the road, like, you know, that sort of footage. It is always from this neighborhood. I'm not going to say where it is just for the sake of privacy, but like literally, it doesn't matter if it's showing something in Texas, or they always show the footage from this neighborhood because it floods all the time. If it rains, it floods. When my kids were in school there, every time there'd be a big rainstorm, we'd get a message saying either come an hour early or come 2 hours late to pick them up, because otherwise the streets are going to be flooded. It's a very flood prone area on a normal day. And heaven forbid there's a big storm, these houses flood badly, really, really, really badly. And it's actually being dealt with on a national level. That being said, we're pretty good at adapting. And this neighborhood, because they have been flooded so many times from every storm that's a hurricane or a tropical storm that comes through the region, these folks have it down. And so one of the things I was doing, aside from my preps, which we'll kind of get into that, and the things I had prepared ahead of time, was after the first storm, I was listening to everything they were talking about, thinking, you know, maybe I ought to be doing this in case it happens again. And so I was literally like shopping online because you couldn't do much of anything else. On my phone saying, oh, well, they said this would have been helpful. And I'm buying all this stuff on Amazon, just shipping it to me because you couldn't buy anything locally. I'll come back to that in a second. But I was literally just creating an Amazon shopping list of, well, they said they had all of these things and it helped them. And my house didn't get hit in the first storm. So I'm going to buy all this stuff now just in case. And I did. And I had all that stuff coming, and it was slow. It was going to take a week because everything in the nation was gone. Like you couldn't buy red gas cans. You couldn't buy, like those big Sterilite plastic bins that you use to store things. You couldn't do that. You couldn't buy the sealants that people use to use their home, or the tape, like all of the things. And I now have a long list that I keep and share. And then we, every kind of May of the year, sort of make sure we have all of our stuff. Empty sandbags. Like you couldn't get any of this stuff. So I was buying it all online, figuring, maybe in a year or two, it might be helpful. We'll see what happens. And then, of course, 12, 10, 13 days later, I've lost track. Here comes Milton barreling at us, and having my father lost his house in the first storm, as did most of it. Helene was the one that really impacted it. And it was amazing because the storm didn't hit us. The storm kind of curved up the coastline and just pushed all that water in. So it was a very strange storm in that there was not any wind damage. It was purely water. You could sit there and watch the water rise and watch it go down. And it rose without really a lot of surf, which would have added even more damage and higher waves. And luckily we didn't get that. Even for the houses that were horribly impacted, it would have been so much worse. It was just like somebody had left the water running and the tide came up and things changed. But it was such an awakening to see what a storm 100 miles off the coast could still do. I mean, we lost all of this and the storm was 100 miles away. I mean, I think that's what people don't understand, right? Like you don't have to get it up the gullet, right? Like water is an amazingly powerful force. And so this storm was not anywhere near us, but it put the way that the water and the wind was working, it pushed all that water in. That being said, I had bought all this stuff. And when Milton was coming, and now, of course, you've just seen all these horrible things happen with Helene. So everybody's prepping in ways that they would not have previously done, right? So we were taping up our house and doing all the things. You couldn't get the tape. You couldn't get the sandbags. Luckily, my Amazon shipment came like the day before.
Oh,
and it was kind of crazy, but we did get it all put together. Anecdotally, and I put this kind of out there, the first storm hit, and we and a great many of our friends had for a year a planned vacation to go on a cruise with all of our kids. We homeschool, and so we had put this together just for fun for a long weekend, and we took all the kids with us, and there was about 7 or 8 families, and we all went on a cruise, and we left on Friday, and we were coming back on Monday. Because it was a regional cruise, most of the people on the ship were from the area. Like that's how these cruises work. That it's sort of a neighborhood cruise. Everybody was from the greater area of where we are. By about the second day, we began to see that there was this other storm, and now you're on a ship. You can't prep. You can't do anything. Like you're on a ship and you see this storm. And at the time, Milton was looking like it was going to come straight at us. It was supposed to be a 3 or a 4. And so by Sunday, we're all like the mood on the ship, like you get in an elevator and everybody on the ship is just sort of like, oh my God, like strangers on the ship. You could tell how stressed everybody was. And we finally got off the ship Monday morning and raced home to prepare our house and then to race out. So like it was one of these things where you realize that you're not always home. You're not always there to do the things you need to do. And so one of the lessons I've sort of learned is I now, aside from my very extensive list of what I need to do in what order, we now have a simplified list to like hand family and friends saying, okay, you're never going to figure out this list, but here are the things that you absolutely need to do for us. And that's sort of become part of my preparedness package that I have ready to go for whatever we need to do. And, living in Florida, there's lists for everything. Hurricane, well, I'll add diabetes is the first thing on my list. Hurricanes are probably second. And we have very extensive kind of what to do when, but you see hurricanes coming. We have friends and family in other parts of the country and world where it's an earthquake or a fire where there's no time. Like, oh my goodness, we got to go right. You have minutes to get out and be safe. Hurricanes aren't like that. So there's two caveats. One is you have plenty of time, like before and even like during, that you really don't have an excuse not to get your act together, because it's like a very slow roll. Like, you have plenty of time. And in the modern era of the news cycle telling us about potential hurricanes 2 weeks out, you really have plenty of time. In fact, the biggest problem we have is sometimes it's too much the sky is falling, and they tell you about things way so early that people kind of go, this again? Like, do we have to talk about this again? And then those storms don't come, because when we start talking about a depression when it's off the coast of Africa, it's a little bit too much. But by the time the storm's about 3 days away, you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen, that you're going to be in that zone. And this is when you need to do sort of the topping off of what your prep is. Get some more water, get some more fuel, get some more propane, but you should really have 95% of it done already. And you certainly should have your planning stage done. Like, where are you going to go? When are you going to go? What are you going to take with you? It's really funny when you evacuate from a hurricane in Florida, there are sort of these golden hours. Everybody seems to leave at the same time. And then you end up stuck on the road for like hours. And there's this mentality that evacuating means going to Georgia. Well, no, you don't need to go to Georgia. But if you live on the coast and you're going to be in the direct path, then you at least need to get pretty significantly inland. And yes, you got to plan ahead, because those hotels fill up, right? So you want to go at one of two times. You either want to go really early or really late. And I'm not advocating going really late, but there is something to be said of, if you have a hotel and it's an hour and a half inland from where we are to get to the Orlando area or something like that. And if you can't get a hotel in Orlando, then the world has ended, because I think there's enough hotel rooms in Orlando for like half the nation or something silly, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, you can get a place. You have to have a plan. You have to know when you're going. You got to make sure you have enough gasoline to get there. And it's not just about the getting there. It's when you come back that you can't get gas. And we can talk about that. But you need to have a plan as to what you're taking with you. And what we actually found, we did not evacuate for Helene with good reason. So we knew what the storm was doing. We knew it was going to shave the coast and not come inland. So our only concern for Helene was water and not wind. And those are very different animals, right?
Yeah,
in terms of immediate danger. Yeah. But for Milton, we did, because Milton looked like it was going to be a windstorm. And it was a windstorm. Luckily, it lost a little bit of its oomph before it got to us. But the irony for Milton was we did all the things we do. We evacuated to the middle of the state. We had family that had found a great place for us. We took tons and tons of stuff with us. And even where we went in the middle of the state, lost power. And so we only stayed there for about a night, just to basically get out of the zone of, is your house going to fall over, to get past that phase. And then where we were, I had taken a portable generator and battery backups and things with us, but they didn't have power. They didn't have AC, because what I took with this portable didn't do that. But our house has solar. So we came back like the next morning and found, of course, that we had power, we had solar, and we were one of two houses in the neighborhood, the extended neighborhood, that had power, because there were two houses, ours included, that had a full solar roof. Game changer. We had done that the year before, after having lived through many storms without power for many, many days. And that's not fun. So we personally had power, but the entire neighborhood did not have power for a week, which is a really long time. I've watched some of your videos where you talk about testing it out, and I know how horrible it is, because we weren't testing anything. It was the real deal. But we were lucky. After about 8 days, the entire, what do you call them? The electrical tower fields, like the big stations,
Yeah.
Every one of the big power tower things you see, usually they have like 10 to 20 big towers there. They were all down. Like, it wasn't about fixing, it was about rebuilding. And that was not fast. But it was a priority, and it got done, but it was 8 days, 7 days. We also learned, and our town learned, it was the first time in a very long time that a major storm had kind of come at us. We'd had lots of scares, but it really had never gotten this bad. And we got a notice during Helene that if the water came up 7.5 feet, that the sewage system would have to go offline for the area, because if they didn't, then the sewage system would flood, the city sewage system, and it would be down for months. So they did notify us. Interestingly, the notification systems that had been built kind of in the COVID era, with all those, text messages, emails, it worked phenomenally. I mean, I have to tell you, like, I was super, super impressed by the communication. Like, it was constant. We were always getting text messages and emails, to the point where, like, every 5 minutes there's a new update. But they gave us a lot of warning. And then at like 11:47 at night, we got we're going to take down the sewage system, which is a big deal. And it's one thing to live without power.
Yeah.
We talk about, okay, well, there's no power, and so the water may be down after a few days because you can't flush your toilets when the power stations are down, but it's no big deal. You pour some water in a bucket and you flush.
Right.
Can't do that when there's no sewage. In fact, there were a lot of very big, very loud, blatant warnings warning people absolutely not to do that, or the sewage would back up into your home. And I know that's one of Jonathan's favorite subjects.
So people don't think about, but it's real.
Yep. So fun story. Again, this is during Helene, and I had spent years, reading and learning, some from you and some from others, and books and all sorts of places. And I had all sorts of interesting things kind of put away just in case. And so it's 11:47 at night, and I'm looking at my husband, who's not as into preparedness as I am, but goes along for the ride and is a really good sport about it. And his attitude has changed significantly after these 2 hurricanes. But he looks at me and goes, well, what are we going to do? And I go, it's okay. We just need kitty litter and some trash bags, and I can make this work. And he looks at me and goes, we don't have a cat. I went, doesn't matter. I have plenty of kitty litter. And he looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads. But we did. And we very quickly ran through the house and got a little teeny cup and pulled as much of the water out of the bowls as we could, and double bagged them with construction grade trash bags and put some kitty litter in there. I was very proud of myself for doing such an amazing job. Went shortly thereafter to attend to matters and forgot that your brain and your hand are wired, and flushed the toilet. So the piece of that we then added was, you have to actually undo the hinge so that you don't forget these things. But since then we've actually built some buckets that keep all of these things together, so that we can rapidly run through the house and set it up so that this doesn't happen again. So it was fun. And then the third thing that happened, of course, is we had no water. So we had some water stored. I had some of those big blue 5-gallon buckets. We learned our lesson in that those screw tops, the big screw pieces that go on those buckets that you're supposed to replace with a spigot, and there's usually like a little place to put the spigot. The version we had, you actually had to cut that heavy plastic to screw the spigot in, which I didn't. You just don't think about these things, right? No. We did it. It was not super easy, but it was a hurdle to doing what we need to do. After this was all done, I emailed the company and said, don't you have a better way? They're like, oh yeah, we have these alternate taps that like already have the thing cut out. So we have changed that as well. The last thing we learned, when you talk about all the services, so if you've got your power, you've got water, you've got sewage, right? But the one that really matters, and in some ways people go crazy about, is internet, okay? So even if you have power, and we had solar, right? Even if you personally have power, that doesn't mean there's any internet, because the companies that provide the internet to you, all of their way stations have the same damage that everybody else does. As an example of that, Irma came through 7 years ago. It was before COVID, maybe 7 years ago. We got hit with it as a windstorm. We didn't get a lot of flooding, but there was a lot of wind and a lot of damage from the wind. And one of the local internet companies, which was WOW, was newly involved in the region and had just built all these spanking new state-of-the-art way stations for everything that they do. And every single one of them fried. And we didn't have internet for 8 weeks. And they were doing all sorts of stuff, trying to help us out, giving us time on our cell phones, whatever. But I work from home. My husband works from home. My children are homeschools. Not having internet is
That's rough.
awful. So after Helene, again, lessons learned from Helene, I was like, we remembered what it was like when we didn't have internet for 6 weeks back during Irma. And I'm going, I'm not going to do this again. So I had been on the fence and finally broke down and bought a satellite internet provider. I bought Starlink. However anyone feels about the company, it's still probably the best service provider for internet. And so my idea was that we would buy it and just sort of hold on to it. They had a service where you only had to turn it on when you needed it. So like you could just turn on for a month and turn it off. And that was great for me. So aside from paying to just purchase it, you really weren't like on the hook for lots of money. You could just have it. And I ordered that 2 days after Helene, and it came 2 days before Milton. And when we evacuated, it went with me. And we had actually bought this super long cord so we could like hot run it out into the front yard because we didn't have it on the roof yet. And a few weeks later, we got it installed. It worked so well that we've actually bought a portable version for taking with us for wherever we would have to go if we had to leave again, and we will leave again. So it's just, there's a lot of stuff.
So much to think about. And you've learned some great lessons. And I love how you live something and it doesn't work. And so you fixed it, right? You do what you need to do so that the next time you are better prepared. I really appreciate that about you. Like you're learning. You're learning. You do the best you can with the knowledge you have, and then you gain more knowledge. I don't want to gain that knowledge personally, but
this is not the way to learn it. And one of the things we talked about, I think, that I want to just touch on briefly is that we all see those first days after hurricane. It's all over the news and everyone's talking. There's all those pictures of the people again on the canoes going down the road and like all those things. And you see a lot of that. What you don't see is that it's a year later and my father's house is still sitting empty and it hasn't sold yet. Or that we have lots of friends who are just barely getting to the point where they can fix their homes because there was all sorts of red tape and waiting on FEMA money. And that's not to say that we don't approve of FEMA. It's just that there is this slowness between your mortgage company and FEMA and insurance. And like all of those things are not fast by any means, even if you're doing everything right. And we did everything right. And we had people willing to help us and to go to bat. It is a slow process. It is so slow that one of the problems that has happened is that there's a rule where we live that if you have to rebuild more than 50% of the value of your home, you have to lift your home, which is a very, very expensive issue. So, and this neighborhood I was talking about, lots of them got hit by. We're not talking about big houses. We're talking about 1,200 to 1,600 square foot homes, right? So if you have to spend more than half the value of the home, you're supposed to lift it. And lifting a home is $200,000 to $300,000 minimum, like minimum. And I know this having listened to all of these stories. But the problem is, and this is where people again don't understand. So it's about a year later, and the city and the county have gone through because so much time has passed, and they are literally dropping the values of the homes because the homes aren't worth as much anymore because of damage or changes to the market because of all of the flooding, like whatever the reason, right? So it was bad enough to start with when they thought they could spend 50% of their previous value. And now they're finding that they're literally selling their homes at 50%. People just want out. So they've been selling those homes so low that it's dropped the market value down so much that 50% isn't 50% anymore. For some of them, it's, 30%, 20% of the original value. And there are things you can do to help this, but they involve dealing with the city and lawyers. And it's just an ongoing process that people don't think about. No one's talking about those storms anymore. Now we're looking at what's out in the Gulf right now. I mean, it's just, but this is not over. And even things like, and this is a horrible thing, we had very good friends whose parents lived in that neighborhood and they live in our neighborhood. And it took them 9 months, 8 months to rebuild their house. Did a lovely job, understanding that there was 3 to 4 feet of water in their homes, right? And so they moved back in, and within a week, in the middle of the night, something in the electrical, which you never can see, even when you think you fixed it, caught fire and the house burned out. And luckily they got out. But then you start saying to yourself, where is your comfort level? Like, what I can see, like, they strip them down to the walls and you see things, but you don't know where something shorted on the second floor because of a problem on the first. Like you just, there's this uncertainty. And that was the other thing that happened. It wasn't just that houses flooded. I mean, you go back at the time, we had 3 friends during the storms whose houses burnt down. One broke, and it was all from, one was a Tesla in the garage, and Tesla batteries and salt water don't merge well. They catch fire, okay? One was a lithium battery, same thing, from a kid's scooter in the garage. And I forget what the third one was, but all 3 of them caught fire and burnt down. And don't even, like, that was not, it was for me after Irma, but for a lot of people, going and finding all the lithium batteries, and think how many tools you have in your garage, those DeWalt batteries that are, like, you can't have any of them in the water. And so you have to think to get rid of all of that stuff. And you're already stressed out and trying to evacuate and figure, that wasn't on everyone's radar because it's a newer technology. It was different. It was a lot of things people had not considered.
So much tragedy, right? And yet I loved that you had said something to me about, you're all safe and happy, so you're going to call it a win. I really appreciated that attitude.
We did. In fact, we ran what we called a halfway house for lost neighbors because, again, we had power, right? So we had power and we had, for Milton, internet. And so we would every morning send out a text message to the neighborhood. And as part of this, we got every neighbor, there must be 100 of them, all in a text chain so that we now have that going forward. And every morning at 8 a.m., we opened our doors with hot coffee and said, bring your laptops and work from here if you're a kid and you need to do your homework. And we did. And we had, I don't know, a half dozen people at any given time sitting in various rooms in the house on their computers to do, whatever they had to do, whether it was work or it was, doing their homework or interacting with tutors. But and what was really nice was some of this was neighbors that we had sort of lost track of, not track of, we just weren't as close as we used to be. Say what you want about the pandemic, people drifted, right? Like we just weren't as friendly. And we had gone from a very tight neighborhood where we had potlucks and did things all the time. And in those years, everybody had just gotten a little insular and had drifted. And there were people that we would see and sort of wave on the road, but we didn't really chat with as much as we did when our children were little. And it was actually quite nice, silver lining, that they would all be in the house and we would sit around and talk because you're not watching TV and you're not doing other stuff. And so people sat around and we chatted and we played catch up and we sort of reconnected with a lot of people. And I had a lot of solar battery generator kind of things. And so we sort of ran a checkout system to that. And we had all these power strips plugged into the house and people would bring in their phones and their portable batteries and stuff. And they would come in every day and plug them in so they'd have them at night. Like it was sort of this charging station thing that we did. And it worked really well. And it was nice to reconnect and we had cold drinks and, it was nice.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That's golden. Okay, let's talk just a little bit for just a minute about the medical aspect of this.
So I think I mentioned earlier, my daughter is an insulin-dependent diabetic. My husband's also a diabetic. I have some health problems, as does my other daughter. And on a normal day, that's not a big deal. The diabetic is probably the bigger factor. And I always say that when you are a parent or a mommy of a diabetic, you're a prepper every single day. There's an emergency all the time in our lives, whether it's 3 a.m. because someone's sugar is low, or we're out to eat and we've run out of insulin. I mean, like it's that kind of preparedness mindset is a constant. So you tend to think that way. For us, a large part has been, but it's funny because she was diagnosed as a diabetic after Irma. So we had dealt with Irma with her and everyone else and had it, let me preface, hurricanes are fun when you're a kid, okay? Like, I know that sounds crazy, but
adventure.
But when I was little, it was for me too. I mean, I remember standing on a skateboard, holding an umbrella as the winds came and like take it off down the road. Like when you're a kid, you don't get it. Where we stayed during Irma, there was a stage, and before they lost power, the kids are up there rocking and rolling and like just having a blast, right? After Irma, when we walked away from our house that time thinking, is it going to be here when we come back? And then after my daughter was diagnosed, you start thinking, okay, this is different. What do we have to have for a few days, week? And when do we need to go? And do we need to go sooner? And do we have to have something staged medication wise? So certainly having all of your medications on hand. And the state lets you fill prescriptions early if a hurricane's coming. So usually about a week before a storm, you can actually go fill your prescriptions. Even if you're not due to fill them right away, state law mandates that you can. You can actually go and say, I'm supposed to get my medicines in 3 days, but you can do them now. And so you should make sure that you have plenty of medicines. And for a lot of people, because of insurance, they're kind of always on that just a few more days mentality. They're sort of forced into the, I have to wait till I can refill. I have to. And there are workarounds around that. As a physician, I have ways for my family. But I'd say 90% of people who are buying their prescriptions with insurance are sort of trapped by that. And there's not a good way around that other than to just always try to get a few days ahead and maybe slowly build things up. But you absolutely should. You should keep all of those things. As a mom of a diabetic, we keep extra insulin on hand that we pay cash for to have that insulin available to us, because that's something that you can't do without. The elephant in the room for any emergency movie or book is always, and then the kid was diabetic. Like that's always the punchline to the elephant in the room. So we have a little fridge that I keep insulin in, and I have a bag next to that where I can rapidly move her insulin over, and we keep all of her, stuff, the needles, the syringes, like the things that go with it. And so that is always prepared. You also have to bear in mind where you're going. So we knew we were going near my in-laws in the middle of the state. We took our stuff with us, but my daughter is a bionic kid, and she's got a continuous glucose monitor on one arm, and she has a diabetic Omnipod on the other that gives her insulin, and the whole system works through her phone. She's truly like a bionic kid. And those devices sometimes will fail. They are very expensive if insurance isn't paying for them. And you want to have them, and sometimes they're not always available quickly. Like even if you can fill them, they're not always available. And so we actually had my in-laws that were way away from the storm go and buy some so that we had them on hand, because we knew we were going there, and it was easier for them to just buy it there than us to have to worry about whether we could get it here, because the pharmacies are shutting down. Like that's the thing. It's not just that you're leaving. Everybody is leaving, because the people that work in the pharmacy down the road from you, well, they live there too, and they've got to pack up their homes and get the heck out of Dodge. And so you want to sort of think ahead to where you're going. Can you get things where you're going? Get them even if you might not need them, because I promise you after the storm, you can't get them because they don't have power, right? The pharmacies didn't have power for a week. Even where we went to my in-laws, there was no power there. And so everything was closed. So you really want to make sure ahead of time that you have all of your stuff, that you have a way of keeping things cold. If, diabetes is one example, but there are other types of health problems where you have to keep things and medicines cold. So we have this, it looks like a regular cooler, but it's actually a fridge freezer. I love it. And it runs off of a backup battery, and it can run off of any backup battery system, whether it's just a little, like a brick that you get to do them, or one of the bigger Jackery, EcoFlu, Bloetti, something like that. But it's a game changer to be able to keep things cold. The same thing is true for when there's no refrigeration and, after the storm, it's 95 degrees outside. Being able to have cold things is a game changer.
So we were talking earlier, which, by the way, I love talking to you. I've learned so much from you. But you have a fun exercise that you do with your family to teach them what they would need. And anyway, tell us about that.
I think I mentioned that we homeschool. Our kids are pretty highly academic, and we have this group of great teenagers. And we've done a few talks for them, just sort of that preparedness mentality to get them thinking. One of the games that I've played with myself is, what about if something happens and my kids aren't with me? And I think every parent has asked this question, whether they're,
Yes.
at the neighbors, or they're at school, or they're off at college. Like, your first worry is always your family.
It is.
So one of the games that we played, we play different scenarios at different times, and I've done this in other settings, but my kids go to a cooperative where they take classes on Thursdays. And when they're there, there's like 300 people there, lots of kids, lots of parents, teachers. It's all out in the park. It's really kind of nice. But it's a good 30-minute drive from our house, maybe even closer to 40 minutes. So if something happened, and this, like, preface with, this is an extreme scenario, but I like extreme scenarios because it makes you think about everything, right? Like, as I said, my first scenario is my daughter's sugar being low. My second scenario being, the power's out, the hurricanes hit. This is the extreme scenario. But if the closest place to this great big park is a CVS, like in terms of stores, and I have my insulin-dependent diabetic daughter. So we have sort of played this idea of ready, set, go, right? You're at the park and you're teenagers, and every one of you is on your phone, and you're texting the person that's 3 feet away from you. And all of a sudden, as a teenager, the world ends because you can't text anymore. Oh God, like, what do you do? And obviously something has happened where cell phones are down, power's down, you can't get in the car to drive home. And I'm not going to go into whether your car will start or not. That's a whole other discussion, but let's pretend none of that's working. And you're a 40-minute drive from home, which as a young, healthy teenager, realistically is going to take you at least a day, if not longer, to hoof it home. And that's assuming a perfect scenario, right? Ready, set, go. What do you do? Who do you find? Do you go find all the other kids going in the same direction? Which parents in the park might know more? We have one guy who's wonderful, who actually teaches them marine biology in the park and is really good at knowing what foods you can eat. And you need to find him. Don't leave. And he lives near us. I'm like, you need to go get him. But the CVS is nearby, and I have a diabetic daughter. And so I started thinking one day, okay, you have this golden opportunity of, you've realized there's a problem and you've got to get home. And you're a few steps ahead of everybody else who's still sitting around going, what's going on? Why is there no power? Like, my kids would have enough awareness to go, aha, And the idea is that it's about a half-mile walk, maybe a little more, to this CVS. Okay, you go to CVS. You don't have a car. You got to get to CVS. And what do you do first? So in my daughter's case, you don't know whether you're going to be able to walk home in a day or long. You don't know. Could you just hoof it home and get home okay? Or will there be some sort of obstacles? Has something happened that precludes your ability to get home? And for my daughter, getting home means getting to insulin, right? So we've done a few things. The first of which means that she has copies, handwritten copies. In fact, I'll cover it up, but I'm actually in the process right now of doing this for everybody, right? She has handwritten copies of her medications in the back of her phone, between the phone and the phone case. So, and there's also some money there, right? Because you got to pay for this stuff, and you may not be able to use your credit card or a credit card reader. You have to have enough. Not only do you need the prescription, because the pharmacist can't look up your prescription if you don't have power, right? So you have to be able to get insulin. You have to be able to get insulin with a written proof, right, of what you need. So we have all of her stuff there. And I mean, just to give you an idea of an insulin-dependent tab, it's 4 pages of 3 to 4 scripts on each script of everything she has to get. So we're talking sizable, right? And then you have to have enough money, cash, to pay for whatever you need to get. And that may include getting syringes and other stuff, because my daughter has stuff with her everywhere she goes, but it's for the day. Like, it's your everyday carry, right? It's what's in her purse. She's got her kit, and she's got some lancets, and she's got her insulin pen and her test kit. That's probably fine, unless it's not, or unless she's 14 and she's left it at home, which happens because you're a teenager. And like, what do you do? So you have to think that way. You have to think about, do I have the paper proof to get the prescriptions, right? Do I know what I need? Can I pay for this? Can I sweet talk the pharmacist into doing this? Because some of them may be like, look, we can't access our system right now. So you have to sort of like coach a little bit in terms of like what you say. There is generally a law, at least there is in the state of Florida, that probably most places, that says if you're an insulin-dependent diabetic and you go to a pharmacy, this used to be true, don't quote me, and say, I'm a diabetic, I need insulin now, I don't have my script, I'm going to die if I don't have it, they actually have to fill like an emergency supply for you. At least this used to be true. So you usually can get what you need, right? Even if it's just like enough for a couple of days, right? Mm-hmm. If something has happened, will my daughter's phone, if it doesn't work, then her system is dependent upon her phone. So she can't actually give herself insulin. Even though she has it on her arm, she can't give herself insulin if her phone isn't working, if the device that kind of is the brain to the operation for any reason doesn't work. And so if you play out this scenario to the extreme and say your phone isn't letting you text your buddy next door, like that's talking to you, that means it's also not going to work for giving you insulin or whatever it is that you need to do. And so you have to get insulin that you can give yourself manually, right? So this is part of our thing. So, okay, that's why you go to CVS in the first place. The first place you go is your number one priority is get insulin, get the stuff that you need to give insulin. But there's lots more stuff there, and you might be walking for a day or two, right? So the game is, okay, we're getting all the insulin we need, and there's a gaggle of teenagers who are giggling and being funny because while they're taking some seriousness into this, maybe they're teenagers, right? Like this is what happens, right? But what else is in a CVS? Well, the basics. There's food and water, right? You can get bottled water, which you're going to need a lot of, whether you're a diabetic or not. Walking home for a day and a half in the Florida sun, you better get as much water as you can. So bottled water, getting maybe some of those electrolyte packets because they have the little ones at the store, like CVS has all that sort of stuff. There's food, there's jerky, there's snacks, there's all sorts of stuff. And as a diabetic, you want to think about which snacks. So things like nuts and things like that, because you don't want to use up all your insulin if you don't have to. There are things like umbrellas. There's better shoe wear. Like at least our CVS always has like the seasonal kind of thing. There's usually sneakers and flip-flops and stuff like that. There's socks. Like if you're wearing sandals and you're a girl, like being all fun in a cute little pair of sandals with heels, do you really want to walk home for 2 days this way? So like it makes you think, and not to mention all the other stuff. You know, I've never seen one, and I may do it. I'm going to do one of the, you see those, everything for $100 at Walmart preparedness kind of thing. Well, I want to do one at CVS. Like you can't get to Walmart. And the other thing about CVS is, I say CVS because it's there, Walgreens or whatever your pharmacy is, it's not the first place people think of, which means that some of that craziness, and oh boy, do we see the craziness run on the grocery stores. Like hurricanes, like you can't find anything, like everything is gone. But literally I've seen it where the CVS is right next door to the Publix and everything is gone at Publix. There's no water on the shelf, and CVS has cases because nobody thinks to walk 50 feet to the side and go get what you need to do. So it's a fun game. We're gonna play it out. There's flashlights, right? You've got, sometimes they have cellular batteries. Like they have like everything at CVS. They have cords. They have all the stuff. So we're gonna go play and walk through what you could get fairly inexpensively. And if you had a bunch of your teenage friends with you and you could kind of mass your money together, what could you get to get? I mean, I've seen skateboards, like, which sounds crazy, but in the seasonal fun, well, how much faster are you going to move on a skateboard than you're going to move walking? So they also do things like thinking out of the box. You see those like walker scooter things for those who are impaired that have baskets attached to them.
Uh-huh.
Well, you could put stuff in there. We've all seen the movies where you go get a shopping cart and you put stuff in there too, but there are other ways. They have backpacks, right? Like they have all sorts of stuff. It's a fun game. I'll let you know how it plays out. We're gonna go see how the kids do.
I think that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Shamas. You have been a wealth of information. And for our audience, we are doing 2 other videos at least with her where she's gonna, the first one is doing a bucket or buckets of diabetic food, so that if you have a fragile diabetic, you have got exactly what you need to be able to take care of that person. And then the next video is the complete diabetic emergency kit. And I think that's super valuable for so many of us. Now, I do need to say that right now, Dr. Shamas is not giving medical advice. You need to go to your own doctor. We're putting this out there as some great ideas and what she does for her family, but you really need to consult your own doctor and make sure that whatever you're doing is right for your family.
Right, absolutely.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
And very enlightening.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you survived. And I'm so glad you have all this information to give us.
And now for our audience, the question of the day. Do you have a medical condition that requires you to do some thoughtful prepping? And what are you doing to make sure you have what you need in any kind of situation? Share, put those things in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's learn from each other, and I'll be better because of it. Thanks for being part of the solution.